Hello, Muscatine, and welcome to Muscatine in Focus. We took a week off to relax a little bit, but today we have three visitors. We have Gage Huston, who is the general manager at Muscatine Power and Water. He's going to be talking about bulk energy. We also have Ryan Streck, who is the director of utility service delivery, who's going to be talking about road closures, and then also Councilmember Lewis, who's also going to share a few things as well. So I'd like to welcome Gage Huston. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for being on it earlier, but we're actually in person doing this right now. This is exciting.
Love being in the studio.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about bulk energy today. So got some questions for you, and figured you'd be able to answer these probably pretty easily, obviously, being the general manager. So can you explain Muscatine Power and Water's strategic plan as it relates to power generation?
Yeah, absolutely. So we brought a few slides to pull up on the screen as well to help guide us through some of these conversations. So if we can get the first one of those up. So we rolled out a new strategic plan a couple of years back, and one of the core strategies in that plan was powering the future. So we're actually on the cusp of a pretty significant transition in how we produce and deliver energy for the city of Muscatine. And so we identified a strategy to manage through that transition in a way that maintains our award-winning reliability, our low rates that we're very proud of, but also reduces our environmental impact. And we go to the next slide. One of the objectives within that strategy is about transitioning reliably and safely. And so we need to ensure that as we go through that transition, we keep our operations safe and reliable for our customers. And then also we maintain all of our environmental compliance requirements during that transition, which is very important.
So is Muscatine's a part of the grid, is that right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Can you explain that if that's all right?
Yeah, absolutely. We got a couple of slides for that as well. Muscatine Power and Water is part of a regional grid system referred to as the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or MISO. You can see on the map there, it incorporates several states as well as a province in Canada, and there's about 42 million customers in total that are served by MISO and its member utilities. There are a lot of benefits of being a part of a larger grid like that. The grid operator manages kind of the entire system. It can help move energy around the grid. If you have an unplanned outage of something, they can help deliver energy to an area that needs it. So it's a really good overall operation. The next slide. We put this infographic together to help explain a little bit of how we actually provide power to the community of Muscatine. On the lower part of the slide, you can see our Muscatine system. You can see our local generation resources there in the red and blue buildings. Feeds power into our substations that we have around the community. And then from there, it's transformed to a lower voltage to serve our customers throughout town. But those substations are also interconnected to the MISO grid. And that grid has a lot of different types of resources scattered throughout the MISO region. Has coal and gas-fired resources, nuclear, a lot of wind, especially in Iowa, solar resources, even hydropower. And MISO manages the flow around the grid of all those different resources.
So is there like a headquarters MISO place?
Yeah, there's actually three main operation centers in MISO, one located in each of their three regions, north, central, and south. And those control centers, really have the brains of the operation that manage the system.
Gotcha. So how does MISO manage the energy needs and energy production of our region?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to that graphic. And in any given day and in real time, MISO takes bids from power production facilities to understand how much production capability they have for that day, and then what the load forecasts are for each of the utilities that serve load. And then electricity is one of those things that there is not a significant amount of storage on the system, and so it always has to be in balance. Every second of every day, essentially the same amount of electricity being used has to be produced in balance at all times. So very complex process.
How about, and then I also know that there's like a capacity auction as well.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So every year MISO does a capacity auction to look at for the coming year. Does it have enough production capacity to serve the peak demand in the coming year? So we put together an analogy to help highlight the point. There are two really key aspects about electricity. There's this concept of capacity versus energy. And the analogy we put together is a parking lot. If you were building a new parking lot for, let's say, a high school, you have to build that parking lot big enough with enough spaces to accommodate peak demand. So it's Friday night lights, the team's about to qualify for the state tournament.
Right.
You need enough spaces in that parking lot to accommodate all the cars that you're going to need during peak demand, plus a little bit extra on top of that. The picture on the right represents more of the actual energy flow in any given day. So you have a parking lot that can handle a certain amount of cars, but at any given time, any hour, that parking lot's not going to be full. There's going to be sometimes very few cars, sometimes a lot of cars. So the amount of cars actually going in and out represents the energy flow at any given time. So what MISO looks at is for the coming year, they want to make sure they've got a big enough parking lot to be able to accommodate the peak demand of traffic that they're going to have for the year.
42 million people.
42 million people.
Or household, is it 42 million people?
And that's
or-
households,
wow.
and that includes obviously a lot of commercial and industrial capacity as well, or load as well. And in Muscatine, we're unique in that we have a lot of industrial load for a community of our size, which is very, very beneficial. But we're about, MISO's total peak load is about 1,000 times bigger than Muscatine alone. So we're part of a very big system. And if we go to the next slide, there were some significant changes to the results of MISO's capacity auction this year. So I'll start by looking at the results from last year. The capacity auction is very complex, but at its most fundamental level, it's a supply and demand curve. And so you can see on this chart the dark blue line where it says supply curve. Basically, everybody that has power plant facilities submits them into the auction at a particular price. And MISO takes those and stacks them up and builds that supply curve. And then they also forecast what that peak demand is going to be. Now, a typical demand curve would kind of slope downward. MISO uses a vertical demand curve, and they say, here's our peak load forecast plus some reserves, and they just kind of draw that line on the chart. Where those two lines intersect determines the price for the auction. And in last year's auction, you can see that those two lines intersected at a very low value. It actually cleared at $5 per megawatt day. So a very, very low price. If we go to the next slide, you can see in this year's auction, it was a very different result. So this is a similar chart, but just of the north central region of MISO, which is where the issues were this year. You can see the supply curve, very similar to what we saw last year, but the demand curve is all the way over to the right, showing that there's more demand than the total available supply in the north central region. And even with importing some capacity from the southern part of MISO and some external resources, they were still short about 1,300 megawatts. And so since those lines didn't intersect, the auction basically cleared at its maximum possible price, so at $236 per megawatt day. So 236 versus 5 is an increase of about 46 times what we saw last year.
So what caused the significant change?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the primary factors that's causing the change is the different types of resources that are serving the load in MISO. So over the last several years, we've seen continued retirement of more traditional base load resources like coal units, natural gas-fired units, even nuclear units that have retired. Our only nuclear unit in Iowa retired a couple of years ago. And it's being replaced with more intermittent resources like wind and solar. Now, increasing the amount of wind and solar on the system is a good thing for us overall, but it brings a lot of challenges because those resources aren't dispatchable. They can't be relied on to turn up the same way that more traditional resources are. When the sun and wind are available, they're outputting energy, but at other times something else has to be able to make up the difference. So as we see that shift in more renewables, that puts a bigger strain on the system to balance out the load at all times. And I think we've got another chart that talks a little bit about how not all megawatts are the same. And this is a chart we put together for a presentation for our board a few months ago. And the row across the top represents more traditional type resources. So if you had, let's say, 100 megawatts of nameplate capacity, the second column, the capacity credit that you get for that is very high. It's about 95% or so. But when you get to wind and solar, because they're not available anytime you need them, the actual credit that MISO gives you for that capacity is much less. So in the case of wind, you only get about 23% of that nameplate nameplate capacity and capacity credit. So as you see those more traditional resources at the top retire and replaced with the resources in the middle, it puts a bigger strain on the system to serve that peak load.
Gotcha. So what is the significance about the auction results? I know you just kind of touched on it, but...
Right, but yeah, for us here locally, the significant result is that all of our resources that we have here in Muscatine, we have 3 generation units here in Muscatine, our units 7 and 8, which we refer to as Plant 1, and then our Unit 9, our newer unit. All of our capacity cleared in the auction, which means they all have to be available to serve Muscatine and to serve the MISO grid for the coming planning year, which runs June through next May. And because of the results showing that shortfall, there's an increased risk that there could be issues on the grid during that year, and so our resources could play a very important role in serving not only Muscatine, but in helping to serve the grid in the coming year.
How old is Plant 1, if I may ask?
Yeah, we have Unit 7 was commissioned in the mid-1950s, and Unit 8 was commissioned in the late 1960s. So we're talking about units that are in that 60-plus year old range. But still, very reliable and very stable most of the time. We actually had an incident last week or 2 weeks ago where we needed to call Unit 7 on to help support our system. And even though it's our oldest unit, it's one of our more stable units, and it got called up. Our operators at the plant did an excellent job getting the unit online and helping to support the system in short order. It's fantastic.
Gotcha. So what happens if there's not enough energy produced versus what is needed? And what is the likelihood of Muscatine residents and businesses being impacted?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what we're seeing in the MISO grid, especially for this year, is that it's going to be very tight for capacity. And even though we have enough generating capacity locally, if the grid itself gets too short, they could implement protocols where they have to do what they refer to as load shed. And to do that, basically every MISO member would have to shed a certain amount of load to keep the system stable. We've never had to do a load shed in Muscatine, thankfully, but I think the risk of that is higher this summer than it's ever been. Now, load shed can be a really scary thing to talk about because it's never popular to have to, take customers offline, but it's a last resort step to really protect the overall grid. Because if you didn't take those steps to shed load and keep the system stable, the end result could be a cascading blackout, which would be much, much worse for the system. It would take much longer to restore power. All of your customers would be out for a much longer period of time. It could take weeks or even days or even weeks to get the system back up. So a load shed event is really kind of that last resort. Keep the system from cascading into a blackout. You get through a few hours of troubled time, and then hopefully the system stabilizes. Again, we've never had to do that in Muscatine yet, but we have protocols and procedures in place to accommodate that. And we would try to communicate with our customers if we saw an event like that starting to approach. We would give customers some notice. We would ask customers to reduce load as much as they could voluntarily to try and reduce our impact on the system before we would ever get to that step.
So, obviously, I'm thinking commercial industries use much more energy compared to residential, but what are some tidbits you can give to, the audience, just saying, to be resourceful? And
Right, yeah, great question. So if we get to that kind of critical time and we put out public appeals to our customers, we would encourage them to do things like turn the thermostat up a few degrees, assuming this is in the summertime. Sure. Turn the thermostat up a few degrees, let that air conditioner cycle off for a little period of time. Air conditioning adds a significant demand to the system, so if we could reduce that, that would have a big impact. Keep your curtains closed, windows closed. Try and keep as much of that cool air in the house. Shade trees are an excellent thing. We support the Muscatine Branching Out program every year because shade trees are a way to keep that cool energy in the house and reduce the amount of air conditioning load. Even businesses could look at reducing their essential services they might have during that time and cut those off, maybe raise their thermostats, maybe reduce some lighting load if that's a possibility. So there are a lot of steps that we could take and would encourage customers to do so.
So plant trees and get some solar shades.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the last slide I think we have here really just kind of pulls us back into what we refer to as a balanced approach to our Powering the Future plan. We look at balancing 4 key factors: keeping the system reliable, keeping our rates affordable for customers, being flexible as the market is changing significantly right now, but then also having goals around sustainability and reducing our environmental impact. What we're seeing, and especially with the capacity auction results in MISO, is that the value of that installed capacity is important, and that value could remain escalated in the coming years if we continue to see high auction prices like this. And so as we continue to see the expansion of those renewable resources, we think it could drive down the cost of energy at times, because once you have those wind and solar facilities in place, the fuel, if you will, is free. And so it could drive down the cost of energy, but it could drive up that cost of capacity, because you need something still as a backstop. So when the wind dies down, you still need something to back that up and support the system. And we think that as we're going through these changes, maintaining a focus on that balanced approach is really important. And it also reinforces the importance of the local assets we have today and the resources and the staff that we have. Our power plant staff are top-notch folks that we have down there. And it's really, really important, the work that they do and the impact that they have on Muscatine's electric supply.
It's one of those things that I think many of us take for granted. Honestly, it's, energy, right? Electricity. So is there anything else you'd like to share to Muscatine?
I don't think so. Just big thanks to the MPW staff, as I mentioned, the power plant employees that do a fantastic job. I've talked to customers in the past that didn't realize we even had power plant here in Muscatine, and it's such an important part of our infrastructure, but something that, quite honestly, we're okay with being behind the scenes, and when people take it for granted, that means that it's working well, and so that's kind of what we shoot for. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for being on the show today. Appreciate it. And next we have Ryan Strecht, who is also from MPW, who's going to be talking about road closures as well. So enjoy that, and thank you.
Hi there, I'm Ryan Streck, Director of Utility Service Delivery at MPW. I'm back today to alert the community about an upcoming MPW construction project requiring a road closure. The road closure will impact Mulberry Avenue between 9th Street and 10th Street from Tuesday, May 31st through Friday, June 24th. The water main in this area has had numerous breaks over the last few years. Because the water main is under the street, repairs are costly each time it breaks, and the numerous disruptions in water service is an inconvenience to our customers. Now, normally in one block we wouldn't have a lot of customers, but here at Jefferson Elementary we have 444 young customers, and every time the water main is disrupted, we have to cancel school, and that creates a lot of inconvenience. A review of the number of main breaks and the cost of repair weighed against MPW's commitment to reliability made the decision to replace this water main an easy one. This ongoing evaluation of water infrastructure is an example of MPW's continuing investment in reliability. Keeping the road closed during construction will allow MPW water crews to work safely, efficiently, and effectively without the stress of sporadic traffic conditions. Although road closure is inconvenient, the safety of construction crews is imperative. Road detour signs will be placed to guide traffic around the construction zone. Motorists are advised to leave a few minutes early to reach their destination on time and to use caution in and around the work zone. Highway and road work zones are hazardous for both motorists who drive through an array of signs, barrels, and lane changes, and for workers who build, repair, and maintain our streets, bridges, highways, and utility infrastructure. Imagine working next to a busy road. Drivers are going too fast, they're distracted, and those cause major accidents resulting in property damage, even death. Fines and penalties can cost thousands of dollars to offenders as well. Road closures are meant to keep drivers and construction workers all safe. Road construction worker precautions can only work to an extent. To keep everyone safe, drivers must also be mindful of active construction sites on the road. Here are some helpful tips to keep workers, pedestrians, and drivers safe. Pay attention. Signs should be posted well before the construction zone. Pay attention to the posted directions and adjust accordingly. You should also stay aware of any unexpected slows, stops, or movement near the work site. Keep your headlights on. making crew members aware of your presence, especially in instances of low visibility. It's important for everyone's safety. Your headlights also help you navigate the modified road or highway area near the construction zone when it's late at night or otherwise difficult to see. Follow the speed limit. Speeds are lower in construction zones, and it's important to follow them to keep fellow drivers and construction workers safe. You will also face a penalty if you are caught speeding or committing other traffic violations in a construction zone. Give ample space. Tailgating is especially dangerous in construction zones if any sudden stops or slowdowns occur. Be patient and cautious when driving near a construction zone. Our team members are working to ensure Muscatine is supplied with ample, clean, and good-tasting water. Although our work may be an inconvenience when trying to get across town, keep in mind MPW, as well as other organizations, are working on your behalf. Thank you, Mayor Bark, for having me today.
Good day, this is Councilwoman Lewis out here at Discovery Park today. It is a beautiful day in our great town of Muscatine. I hope you are out enjoying it. I want to let you know, congratulations to all the graduates over the last 2 weeks, those not only for high school but for colleges as well. It's been a big, great, joyful event. The other thing is I hope you all had a blessed Memorial Weekday or weekend, as we need to remember those that gave their tomorrows for those of us that are still living so that we can have tomorrows. I want to let you know there's lots of things going on in Muscatine. We've got Thursday, almost Friday Fest starting back up again. Unfortunately, last week that got delayed because of the weather. It's kind of soppy down in the riverfront, but hopefully the next one that's coming up will be, they're able to do that. The other thing I want to make sure, or kind of challenge you a little bit, is actually the American Cancer Society actually has a challenge for in June, starting June 1st. They have 30 days, 30 miles, and it's actually a pet challenge. It's to walk your pet at least 1 mile a day. So, and if you don't have a pet, that's okay. Just get out and walk. There's a lot of great things to do in Muscatine. The swimming pools are open, the splash pads are open, the disc golf is open, the golf range is open. So get out, enjoy the fresh air, enjoy the sunshine, and let's have a good time in our city. Have a great day.
Hey, thank you so much, Muscatine, for tuning in to Muscatine in Focus. Just another show of having great people on here sharing what they do to make Muscatine better, and we appreciate you guys so much. We appreciate MPW, the council members that have been on this as well. So just remember, be your best and have a wonderful day. Thank you.